Welcome to Mental Health Momentum, a Silicon Slopes podcast. I'm Dr. David Morgan. I'm a licensed psychologist and the Director of Mental Health Awareness here at Silicon Slopes. And on this podcast, we talk about mental health issues and we look for solutions. And today my guest is Curtis Morley. Curtis, welcome.
Thanks so much for having me, David.
I'm going to tell you a little bit about Curtis here. I'm telling you a lot about Curtis, actually. He's got a prolific bio. It's awesome. Curtis is a Wall Street Journal bestselling author, a 5-times entrepreneur. He's a mentor, a coach, an educator, a thought leader, a mountaineer, and a patent holder. He is a Wall Street Journal bestselling author as well as a #1 Amazon new released bestselling with his book, The Entrepreneur's Paradox. Curtis has built companies achieving 20 times growth and has acquired 96 of the Fortune 500 as clients. He's been Entrepreneur of the Year, 40 Under 40, Flash Forward finalist, Webby Worthy Award, Flash in the Can Award, Adobe of the Site of the Day ×3, and Big Business and Technology Award, Best Technology, and Incorporated 500, 5,000, 6 times, including Hall of Fame. He's been heard on over 1,000 radio stations by millions of people around the country. Curtis has founded several multi-million-dollar successful companies, and his companies include the world's premier award-winning interactive agencies, the world's first interactive digital sheet music company, and an executive coaching company to help bring entrepreneurs to the next level in their business. In between his entrepreneurial ventures, Curtis was head of global and corporate marketing, in between his entrepreneurial ventures, by the way, for Franklin Covey, which included the Franklin Covey brand, all digital marketing, trade show strategy, worldwide marketing management, and the strategy for getting the Franklin Covey books on the bestseller lists. He has taught and built programs at 4 universities, including instructing students in the master's program at the largest private university in the country. And I understand you're getting your own master's in psychology now, right? Did I read about that?
Yes,
okay, right on.
Just started that program.
Right on.
Yep.
And along with his business ventures, he sits on several boards and advisory committees in universities and nonprofits foundations. He has an upcoming book later this year, Counterfeit Emotions, which I have heard him talk about this. We're going to talk about that today as well. It's great stuff. And he's so hoping to share this life-changing message of hope, peace, and joy with individuals and organizations so they can live their most authentic lives. Again, thank you for being here, Curtis.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm very excited to have this conversation.
Curtis and I met about 6 months ago, maybe at a town hall that we did here at Silicon Slopes, and where you talked about counterfeit emotions. And right then I thought, okay, this guy needs to be on the podcast. So, and there's been a series of trial and error to get us here today.
Yeah.
I had to cancel, he had to cancel. So we're glad to be here. This is a long time coming.
Yes, indeed. Indeed.
Well, anything else about your background you want people to know? I mean, that was quite a bit. What do you do for fun? Maybe that is all the fun stuff you do. I don't know.
I do love what I do. Absolutely. For fun, skiing. I love to run and do triathlons and just spend time with family. That's a big one.
So in the triathlons is running your strength?
Yeah. It's definitely the forte out of the 3 disciplines. Swimming, not so much. And biking I do well, but running is really where it kicks in.
Well, and isn't the swimming, like I've heard people talk about that, and it's just like, because it's the first leg, right, of a triathlon, and it's just like you're just in the water getting beat up by other people, right? I mean, sometimes there's so many people.
It's like a washing machine.
Yeah, seriously. I don't know. So you not only have to be able to swim well, but be able to swim well in such conditions, right? That's the
yeah. And it's always, well, it's not always. Mostly it's open water.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've got to be able to figure out where you're going, make sure you're not getting beat up by other people, and not drowned in all.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Good for you. That's awesome. So can you tell me a little bit about just your interest in mental health? I mean, what's driven that? The counterfeit emotions stuff that you talk about that we'll get into later has a lot to do with an individual's mental health. So what kind of piqued your interest in that?
It's crazy because my whole life I've been an entrepreneur, and like you shared, I wrote a Wall Street Journal bestseller on entrepreneurship called The Entrepreneur's Paradox. And after it hit the bestseller list, my publisher said, hey, let's do a 3-book series. And so I was actually writing my second book, and the second book is called The Timeline of Business. And as I've worked with entrepreneurs throughout the years, not only did I find out that they all make the same mistakes, but they make them in the same order. And so it almost becomes predictive. Like if you tell me where you're at and what mistakes you're currently making, I can pretty well tell you what's coming
What
next.
my next mistake's going to be. Yeah.
Yep, I can tell you, okay, this is where you're at. This is how it's going to play out. And I was in the middle of writing that book, and I was blessed with some of the hardest trials of my life. And I use that word very intentionally. I was blessed with it. At the time it didn't feel like a
Right.
blessing. Oh boy. At the time I was just despondent. It hurt. It hurt so bad. And yet because of that, we're having this conversation. And because of that, I called my publisher up and I said, "Hey, I need to write a very different book." And in fact, I don't know if I'll ever go back to the entrepreneurial books because of what was happening for me personally. And then, if it's okay to share a very personal experience, I've got a friend named Jerry Williamson who he was also going through a divorce at about a year behind me. And so I was about a year ahead of him in the journey, and he would come over, and knowing Jerry, like Jerry could make an entire room of people just laugh till their gut hurts. Just that belly laugh that, your cheeks are sore, and just the life of the party, and hilarious and super fun and a good human. And he would come over to my house, and it was not every time, but very often he would leave, and the last thing he'd say is like, "Hate you, Curtis." And I'm like, "You hate me?" I'm like, "Why do you hate me, Jerry?" He goes, "Because I hate crying, and every time I come over here, that's all we do is we just cry." And just getting those emotions out and sharing all of that. And this is the hard part of the story. When I was learning the difference between authentic and counterfeit emotions, Jerry didn't have that same blessing. And he didn't understand the difference between guilt and shame. He didn't understand the difference between pain versus misery. He didn't understand the difference between recovery and sobriety. And it still hurts, but Jerry ended up leaving this earth of his own hand, and I'm not okay with that. And I'm so not okay with that. And that's when I called my publisher and I said, there's a really important message I need to share. And it was crazy because as I was going through this, and as I was starting to understand how pain was not misery, and misery is its very insidious counterpart that hijacks our emotions. And as I was going through this journey, I was like, well, wait a minute, is there a counterfeit emotion for every authentic emotion? And I started digging into the research and started like going heavy, and I realized that yes, there is a counterfeit for every authentic emotion except for one. There's only one that has no counterfeit, and that's peace. Peace is the only emotion that can't be counterfeited. And so I was like, okay, now that I know this, I've got to take a class or read a book or do a retreat or, find a seminar. And I looked everywhere and there was nothing. And I realized the reason there was nothing is, the reason I hadn't been taught this in my youth, because I'm like, why didn't I learn this in school or church or home or, anywhere, scouts? And the reason is because it's just not out there.
Yeah.
This idea of these emotions that look and act and feel like authentic emotions. And what I mean by authentic is emotions that serve us, that take us where we want to go. That whole idea that there's these emotions that counterfeit, there is no book, there is no webinar, there's nothing. I'm like, okay, then I need to share that message. And that's what brought me to today.
I was just listening to a book on not too long ago about entrepreneurship, and the author was saying that some of the best entrepreneurs, they're just so passionate about what they do, and that's what drives a lot of the innovation. And as you talk about your story, I mean, obviously there's a lot of passion there. There's and a lot of personal, emotional experience associated with that, which probably puts you in a perfect position to teach this, to learn and teach it, because it's not just coming from a place of, oh, this is a great idea, I think people need to know this. You're like, this is something that not only learning the difference saved my life, and for others to learn the difference may save their lives as well. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's so much passion behind this because it has made all the difference in my life of understanding these. And the crazy thing is like a lot of my life, I thought I was living a virtuous life. I thought I was living in the authentic, but I was actually deep into the counterfeit. And that's why this topic is so important, is because it's, we're taught from birth, we're taught opposite emotions.
Mm-hmm.
We're taught love, don't hate.
Right.
And love says hug, hate says hit, right? Very different actions. And like you look at the spectrum, they're on the very ends of the spectrum. But what about that emotion that slides right up next to love, that puts on the clothing and wears the mask of love and has the same actions? Because love says put your lips to someone else's lips, but so does lust.
Right.
And it's the same action. It's not hug and hit. It's the exact same action. And that's why these are so sneaky, is because we don't even know when we're feeling this. And all of a sudden we're like, whoa, what? Now I'm in this destructive cycle of disconnection. And how did I even get here? What am I even doing? And we don't recognize, oh, you know what? I bought into the counterfeit.
Right.
And that's where I've been.
In my mind, when you described that, I was seeing the continuum between love and hate on a, just a unidirectional line. And then when you talked about lust, I saw a triangle in my mind, and it's like, and here you've got the three things, because lust, even though it tries to look like love, it's quite different than that. And so it needs to be far away from it as well, but it's not hate either. It occupies a different kind of, physical space in my mind, where those things were. But the problem is that there are so many just small things that can make the difference. I find that in mental health all the time when dealing with people that are struggling with their emotional problems, which is one of the main reasons people come in for counseling, is that they really just don't understand what's going on with their emotions very well. And they have a hard time kind of labeling them and then managing them. And so I love this idea of just kind of just defining the terms almost and saying, okay, this is what this is what lust is, and this is what love is. And then they can start to say, oh, well, now I understand better what I'm feeling. And then you can decide whether it serves you or not.
Yes.
Right? Because that's the next step, is if this emotion is not serving me, then what should I do as a result? Because there has to be action. Understanding is wonderful, but it has to be followed up with action.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love how you put that, because one thing that I always have to caveat is that there is no such thing as a bad emotion.
Right.
That every emotion is a messenger. And the trouble is sometimes we let them become dictators. And even the counterfeits, even though they don't serve us, they still come with a message. Yep. And that is so important that we pay attention to. And one of the dyads, or the pairings of emotions that illustrates this really well, is advocacy versus anger. And this one, there are a couple in the list. There's 36 different dyads of different emotional pairings. And this one, I actually started with anger being authentic. I started with it on the authentic side because that's so important to address what's happening inside. And you look at the pendulum, the emotional pendulum that swings back and forth. And on this side is aggression, is that anger,
right.
The hatred, the rage, I'm going to, hurt you. And that's way up here on this side of the pendulum. And if we let the ball drop and swing to the other side, what we find is suppression. That, you know what, there's something wrong, but I'm not going to address it. I'm going to be the wallflower. I'm just going to be passive. And so you have anger, and then you have passivity over here. But where the ball stops swinging, where the ball finds equilibrium, is healthy expression. So you have aggression, suppression, and expression. And where that is, that's where you find that you are still addressing those important emotions, but you're not taking it to the extreme of anger.
Right.
And it's a prime example of this now is, can I ask you a trick question?
Sure.
Okay. And don't feel bad if you don't know the number or the answer, because I've only had 2 people ever know the answer.
Okay.
Who is Bobby Seale or Huey Newton? Do you know either of those names? Bobby Seale, Huey Newton.
No, I do not.
And it's okay, because I've asked this question to hundreds and hundreds of people.
Do I actually know them, but I don't realize I know them?
Yes.
Is that, okay.
Yes. And everybody does.
Right.
But Huey Newton and Bobby Seale are the founders of the Black Panthers.
Oh, okay.
The Black militant movement in the 70s. And yet, if I were to say who's Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.,
right,
of course you'd know that,
right,
because every major city in the United States has a street called Martin Luther King Jr. And
if not a monument,
a monument or junior high school.
Exactly.
He changed the world.
Yeah.
And if we go back to that pendulum, you have anger, you have passivity, and then you have advocacy.
Right.
And there's only 2 reasons anyone will ever get mad. One is danger, and the other is injustice, a perceived injustice. That's it. There's no other reason anyone would ever get mad. And that perceived injustice, the reason I put anger on the authentic side originally when I was doing my research, is because understanding that injustice and what that means for us individually, what actions we need to take, is so critical. But advocacy is where we address that.
Yeah.
Is that you look at the Black Panthers, they firebombed cars, they killed police officers, they destroyed businesses, like riots, and they saw this injustice and they said, we're going to take that to violence.
Right.
Martin Luther King Jr., he said, I will not stand for this injustice, but what I will do is I will stand at the feet of the Lincoln Memorial with 1 million people to change the world. And that's the reason everyone knows Martin Luther King Jr. and nobody knows Bobby Seale or Huey Newton, is because they took it to that overstimulated sense of that same emotion. But the underlying feeling of that injustice, so important to address, because if we don't, then it just boils.
Yeah.
It just sits inside, and we could take it to the other extreme of passivity and saying, you know what, it's not that important, I won't address it. But no, what he did was, racism is a true injustice.
Yeah.
And that needed to be addressed, that needed to change. And he did, but he did it without the violence, and he did it without the passivity. He did it in the center.
Right, found the middle.
Where that advocacy was.
I love what you're talking about, like the legitimacy of every emotion, because it is true. I mean, every emotion that we feel is valid. The question is whether it's beneficial or whether it's helpful. Because you can say, well, of course, anger is a legitimate emotion, but it doesn't necessarily lead. Most of the time, it doesn't lead to very successful outcomes. Years ago, we hired a nutritionist, and I hired her mostly to help me learn how to eat better. And she said, so many times people put a moral value on the food. This is a bad food. This is a good food. And she really helped me see that differently. And she said, there's no morality associated whatsoever with food. Some food will lead to better health outcomes, and some food will lead to worse health outcomes. And so you just have to kind of decide, what that is. And I think if we detach the morality, for lack of a better word, from some of the emotions, then it's okay to have those experiences. You can't be like, well, I can never get angry, or I can never get anxious. I have people all the time in counseling who not only are they anxious, but they're anxious about their anxiety. They just load the anxiety on top of that, and it's just way too much. And I always tell them, take away that superfluous anxiety. It's okay just to have the regular anxiety. It's okay. A lot of situations are going to cause anxiety. What you need to do is you take a look at it and say, is this serving me? What do I need to do about this? But if it has a real negative connotation, or that it's bad or forbidden or something like that, then it just adds all the more, I don't know, angst to it when you experience it. And so
Yeah.
I love that idea of just kind of stripping away and saying, you can feel all these emotions. That's totally
Yes.
fine.
And do
It-
feel
Yes.
every one of them. And then ask the question, what is the message?
Right.
What is the message this is bringing to me? Yes, because that's where it really gets critical, is if we just ignore it, we're going to either numb, we're going to,
Yeah.
develop personality disorders.
Right,
We're
right.
going to, like, it's a crazy place to be. But yet if we just spend time and we just watch the emotions and let them sit and say, okay, how can this serve me? Like, if there's an injustice, then something needs to be done. Doesn't need to be anger,
Right.
but it does need to be advocacy. It needs to say, you know what, this is not okay, and I'm going to invite you in. One thing that's amazing about the word advocacy comes from the Latin base advocare, which means to invite in. When you advocate, you're actually inviting people in. Martin Luther King Jr., he invited.
Yeah.
He said, come be part of this movement. And you grammatically, you can't use the word advocate and against together.
Oh, right.
You can't say, I'm going to advocate against something.
Because it presumes working together with.
You can only advocate for.
Yeah.
That's it. And so you're still addressing that injustice. You're still,
Right.
that is so critical. If you ignore that, it's damaging to the soul.
Yeah.
But if you say, you know what, I am going to address this, and I'm going to advocate for, instead of fight against, I'm going to advocate for. And so understanding that, yes, there's no such thing as a good or bad emotion. There's some that take us to where we want to go and some that don't.
Yeah.
But they still have that message attached.
Right.
No matter what.
Exactly. And if, in as much as we listen to those messages, then that serves us better, because then we can understand and say, oh, this is something my mind or body is telling me. What should I do with that? As opposed to ignoring them, which is more the tendency anymore. I think that's I mean, there's so much distraction in society. And I think a lot of that, I think distraction is primarily desirable because it does get us out of touch with those things. We have these negative emotional experiences. And so it's really easy to do something that's going to distract us from that, that's going to help us feel better. One of my professors, when I was in grad school, he said people pay top dollar for two things. Number one, to be entertained, and number two, to be kept out of pain. He said those are the highest paying professions you will see in our society.
Yep.
And that's all distraction.
Yeah.
It's all, let me not think about this, but learning to sit with it, like you said, learning to sit with the pain and to understand it. Oh, that's so critical. And there's value in that, particularly for our mental health, because the more you can learn to tolerate that, then the wheels don't have to come off when you're having a bad day. You're like, no, I've been here before. I know how to deal with this.
Yeah.
I can process this and understand it, and then figure out where I want to go from there, as opposed to pushing it away as soon as it comes to you. And then you never learn how to address it. And then every time it comes back, it's this novel experience that you still haven't learned to address in 20 years. And you know, and you still can't deal with it. So
every time that
Yeah.
trigger pops back up, every single time, unless we do the digging.
Yeah.
Unless we dig in the graveyard of our soul and dig up those skeletons.
Yeah.
Then they're going to keep popping up every single time.
So I want to ask you about, because of your expertise in entrepreneurship, and there will be entrepreneurs listening to this, help us find the nexus there. So the work you've done with emotions, and then the work you've done as an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurs have emotions. They have lots of very intense emotions, right?
Mhm.
Starting a business, bootstrapping, whatever they're trying to do. Do you have any counsel or advice for people in that kind of in those beginning stages that are feeling all the feels and all the frustrations? What do you suggest?
Yeah. If you look at the scale of careers and professions and the stress level associated with it, you've got EMTs and emergency room doctors at the top, and you've got this scale. Entrepreneurship is pretty high.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the high stress, and it, going back to the dyads, there's distress, or the anxiety stress, and then there's eustress,
Yeah.
which is actually excitement. And transmuting distress to eustress actually is one thing that entrepreneurs are really good at, is that they take challenges and see opportunities,
Right.
and which is fantastic. And at the same time, I've had some very close friends that have been entrepreneurs that aren't here with us anymore.
Yeah.
And that's really critical. And I love what you said earlier about how we numb, how we take these emotions. We're just like, well, I'm just going to start doom scrolling.
Right.
I don't know what to do with this emotion. I don't even know what this emotion is. Brene Brown did a study of over 7,000 people, and she asked them in the moment, so what are you feeling right now? And when she asked that question, just guess how many emotions they could identify. Take a wild stab at how many emotions they could identify.
And at any given time, any person?
Yeah, in the moment.
In the moment.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm inclined to say that they almost maybe couldn't describe anything because they just don't know what they're feeling, but I think that might be a wrong answer.
Close. It was
Okay.
3.
It was 3? Okay.
Mad, sad, glad.
Okay.
I'm either happy, I'm angry, or I'm upset and
Right.
sad. And that was it. They could identify 3 emotions. And I've done focus group after focus group where we do this exercise where we write out emotions on sticky notes. And so I literally have thousands of emotions. They're now in my shelf in my office, so I keep my emotions on the shelf.
Yeah.
But there's thousands of emotions that we can feel, and people only know 3:
Yeah.
mad, sad,
Right.
glad.
Right.
They don't know what's actually happening. And with what's happening with social media and the constant barrage of entertainment, that's so easy to do. Hey, dopamine hit. I'm
Yep.
just going to scroll. Oh, there's some more dopamine. Scroll. Oh, there's some dopamine.
Right.
I don't have to actually look at what's happening in my life and address those things. And that's so dangerous emotionally and mentally.
Right. So take the time to sit with it, to look at it, to identify it, and then see if it serves your purpose. And if it does, then fantastic. Lean into it and keep going. And if it doesn't serve your purpose, then figure out what's next.
What's the message? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, figure out what's the message. And I love that you said that, because right now I'm doing a program. One of the dyads is that sobriety is the counterfeit of recovery.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And almost every program out there today is all about sobriety.
Right.
It's all about we're gonna have these demons, these skeletons in our soul, and we're gonna push them down. And that's what sobriety does. Sobriety says, let's push these down,
Right.
and we're gonna teach you all these tools, and we're gonna make you really good at suppressing these emotions that keep trying to come up. And just like a beach ball underwater, the farther you push it down, the more force that's pushing back up.
Exactly.
And so we push and we push and we push, and then eventually the trigger is so big that whoop, there's the demon. And recovery, it's amazing because sobriety is all about the clock. Sobriety says, I'm going to get my stopwatch, I'm going to hit go, and then
See how long I can go until I mess up again.
yeah.
Yeah.
And the definition of sobriety is the time between relapses.
Right. Right.
By definition, there's a relapse on each side.
Right. Right.
and so sobriety cannot include a relapse. And in my program, we don't even call them relapses. We call them lapses, because it doesn't serve us to bring all of the
Right.
history. It's just like, what is the message that's coming right now? And the way I imagine it is, it's actually a gift. A lapse is a gift because it's God taking the map of our soul and putting a pin in the exact location where we need to start digging.
Right. It's more information.
Yes, it's
Yeah,
that
more data,
information to
yeah.
say, this is the skeleton I need you to dig up right now.
Right.
It's
right.
not a 20, 30 mile radius of, hey, go be good.
Right.
And
Right.
it's like, well, I want to be good,
Yeah.
but how do I be good? No, it's the exact location of where we need to start digging. And so we can actually be grateful for that. And so this whole idea that recovery can include a lapse, sobriety can't.
Right. Right.
Sobriety means that my worth clock, the clock that I judge my worth by, I have to reset.
Right.
That's not recovery. Recovery says, I feel that I've got this message and I know where to start digging.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm going to go. And instead of this spiral of, well, I did it once, might as well get my money worth. Let's just keep
now
going.
That I've got a relapse. Let's get a few more in before I start my sobriety clock again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Instead, it's, okay, I did it once. I got the message. I'm driving and I've got my shovel. And it's amazing because most people, specifically this program is about pornography. Most people are not clinically addicted to pornography. Like, you can see it in the brain, and there's a test you can do to see if there's a clinical addiction. And most people are not addicted to pornography. What they are addicted to is shame. They're addicted to the shame that comes with the pornography. And that's what keeps them in that trap. And breaking that shame cycle, breaking them out of that, it's amazing what happens, because the behavior's over here. The need for the behavior is here. When we get rid of that shame and the need for the behavior disappears, guess what?
Yeah.
The behavior disappears too. And that's what it's all about, is digging, is exchanging our shame for shovels.
Yeah. That's awesome.
And digging deep.
Well, listeners, set your calendars for the end of 2025, and so you can buy Curtis's book, Counterfeit Emotions, when it is ready to come out. It's going to be awesome, and highly recommend it. Curtis, thank you so much for coming in today, taking the time to
Thank you.
Share your wisdom and your experience, those heartfelt emotions. It was great. I appreciate it very much.
Thanks, David.
Thanks, everyone, for listening. Remember, change starts with you, and together we can increase our mental health momentum.